Have you ever felt like you kind of grew up too fast? Like maybe you were the family's rock, the little peacemaker, the one who always had to have it together in a crisis. If any of that is ringing a bell, then this explainer is definitely for you. You learned how to be the strong one, right? The responsible one. You carried all this weight that really wasn't yours to carry. And now, as an adult, maybe you just feel completely exhausted. Or you're dealing with this deep anxiety and you find it almost impossible to ask for help. You're just so used to being the one who takes care of everyone else, you've kind of forgotten how to let someone take care of you. So that's the big question we're going to dive into today. We're going to unpack what this experience actually is, how it leaves its mark, and most importantly, the path toward healing and taking back that childhood you might have missed out on. Let's get into it. So, what was really going on in these families? Let's start by putting a name to this quiet, often totally invisible, flip-flop of roles. The term is parentification, and it's sometimes called childhood adultification. At its core, it's a form of a boundary issue. The researcher Linda Burton put it perfectly. It's when children end up doing the heavy lifting in their families. It's what happens when a child's own needs are consistently pushed to the side to take care of the needs of a parent or the whole family.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that parentification isn't just one thing. It splits into two main types. First, you've got instrumental parentification. This is all about the practical stuff, the tangible tasks. You're managing the money, taking care of younger siblings, cooking dinner, maybe even translating for your parents. But then there's emotional parentification, and this one is often way more hidden. This is when a child becomes a parent's therapist, their confidant, or the referee in their fights. You're basically tasked with managing adult emotions, a job no kid is ever equipped for.
And let's be really clear here. Even if there was no obvious physical abuse or neglect, researchers see parentification as an inherently burdensome process. They actually consider it a form of childhood trauma. And why is that? Well, because it forces a child to sacrifice their own basic needs, the need for security, for play, for just being a kid, all to serve adult needs.
So, how does a kid end up in this role they never asked for? Well, it's almost never a conscious choice. It's more of a reaction, a response to what's happening in the family environment.
Parentification usually grows out of some pretty specific family situations. We see it when a parent is struggling with their own mental health, a chronic illness, or an addiction. It can happen when there's economic hardship, domestic violence, or the massive stress that comes with migration. And sometimes, honestly, it's because the parents are emotionally immature themselves and they lean on their child for the kind of support they should be providing.
If this is your story, the most important thing to remember is that it was not your fault. This was not a choice you made. As a kid, you were just adapting to a really unstable environment in the only way you knew how. You were trying to keep yourself and your family afloat. It was a survival strategy, pure and simple.
Okay, so this is where the story pivots. We've talked about the child, but what about the adult that child becomes? This is where the long-term effects of all that early responsibility really start to show up.
You know, a lot of the time, parentified kids get a ton of praise. People call them an old soul, and they're admired for being so mature and responsible. And yeah, they develop this incredible empathy and competence. But that competence came at a huge cost. It was built under pressure, not nurtured through feeling safe and having fun.
The long-term effects can be really profound. Adults who are parentified often have a higher risk for things like chronic anxiety and depression. That constant stress you felt as a kid doesn't just vanish. It can show up physically, leading to a higher chance of chronic illness, because your body has been keeping score all this time.
And this slide just perfectly shows how those childhood roles follow us around. You might look at your life and see that you're always the caretaker. And friendships and romantic relationships, you end up attracting people who need fixing. And that often leads to these really unbalanced relationships that are just full of frustration because you're stuck repeating a pattern you never even chose in the first place.
This creates such a painful paradox. On one hand, you might be codependent, feeling this powerful urge to solve everybody else's problems. But on the other hand, you're hyper-independent, finding it almost impossible to be vulnerable or ask for help. It's like your own needs feel like this huge burden.
And then, of course, there are boundaries, or more accurately, the lack of them. Just saying the word no can bring up this wave of intense guilt and shame. And why is that? It's because you learned from a really, really young age that your needs were inconvenient and that your worth came from meeting everybody else's needs.
So if you're seeing yourself in all of this, you might be thinking, okay, what now? Am I just stuck this way forever? And the answer is absolutely not. Let's talk about the path forward. let's talk about healing.
The healing journey can feel like a lot, but it usually follows a few key steps. First, it starts with just acknowledgement, simply naming what happened without judging it. From there, you can move into self-compassion, which is about letting yourself grieve for the childhood you lost and recognizing how strong you had to be to survive. Then comes a huge one, learning to set boundaries. It's going to feel weird and uncomfortable at first, but it is absolutely essential for your well-being. And finally, please remember you don't have to do this by yourself. Seeking professional support from a therapist can give you a safe, guided space to unpack all of this.
It's so important to get this. This journey isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. Instead, it's about taking on a new role, becoming the loving, attentive, and protective parent to yourself that you always needed. It's about learning to listen to your own needs and finally giving them a voice.
I want to leave you with this question to think about. If you could go back in time and talk to that little adult, that kid who was carrying the weight of the world, what would you say? What comfort, what validation, what permission would they need to hear from the adult you've become? The answer to that question, that's where your healing truly begins.